Hi, my name's Lexi, and welcome to the Women in STEM event. I hope that from this event, we encourage you to further your aspirations in your STEM field, and you have the ability to interact with influential women in STEM and your fellow STEM peers.
Seeing my dad go to his doctor's appointments and seeing how he interacted with the doctors, and I thought that was what I wanted to go into pretty early on.
I was in high school when I took my first anatomy and physiology class, and it was one of the most interesting classes that I ever took.
We don't see a lot of representation for ourselves.
My brother, who's also in a STEM field, when he says that he wants to be an engineer, everyone's, expects it of him, and he's, always encouraged. But me, it's like, will it work out? I don't know.
I think that I chose a STEM career because I knew it was like a career path that would make the biggest influence for women specifically, and to be a part of that would be incredible.
Hi, my name is Lexi Carvine, and thank you for attending the Women in STEM event.
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Pilch. I am currently an undergraduate student here at the University of Arizona, and I am studying molecular and cellular biology and microbiology. I am also a student assistant on the public affairs team here at the BIO5 Institute. In 2017, I also participated in the Keep Engaging Youth in Science, KEYS, research internship run by BIO5. In the future, I'm also excited to be co-facilitating the BIO5 Ambassadors Internship, a previous alum of which set up the first time that this program was run last year. My passion for changing the underrepresentation of women in STEM is why I'm standing here today. In high school, one of the requirements to graduate was to complete an internship, the KEYS program for me, and write a paper about a critical issue in that topic. My mentor in the program was Dr. Pascal Charret from the Biochemistry and Chemistry department here at the university. She and I had many talks about her experience as one of the 7 total female biochemists here at the university, and how she felt like she had to wait to have children, how she had to wait to have children until she was in an extremely stable position. Through my experience with Dr. Charret, the internship, and college, I've learned more than I bargained for. I hadn't thought that the lack of mentorship in STEM and the low number of female role models was as big an issue as it was and is. Spurred on, I wrote my paper on women in STEM, and what I found is that women do have the drive and passion to be in STEM. Even more recently, there have been many programs that have pushed young girls to enter into STEM fields and provide them with encouragement along the way. Most bachelors of science are also awarded to women. The issue comes when they move into graduate and postdoctoral programs. They don't have many female mentors to look up to. My internship, the paper I wrote, and the experiences that I've had made me realize exactly how lucky I was to have the mentors that I did. Now, I want to be that mentor to others and encourage more bright young women to follow their goals and to know that somebody else has been in their shoes and they can achieve their dreams. That's why I'm here today, encouraging those in the audience to look for their own mentors and role models, and in the future, to become those same leaders for others. One reason I decided to stay or come back to BIO5, even if not in a research role, was due to the high number of female leaders that we are so fortunate to have in our ranks. One of those leaders is our keynote speaker tonight, Dr. Amelia Galatano. Dr. Galatano received her undergraduate degree from the University of Chicago before going to the University of Pennsylvania to complete an MD-PhD program. Now, Dr. Galatano is a faculty member in the University of Arizona Phoenix Medical Campus and a member of the BIO5 Institute. Here, she is a physician scientist who both directs a basic science research lab and runs a clinical study to determine if the results found can be translated into humans. Recently, she has discovered a gene pathway that is responsible for determining people's risk for schizophrenia and other serious mental illnesses, particularly in how they respond to environmental factors such as stress. She is a wonderful example of female role models for young scientists like myself and those in the audience. So, without further ado, Dr. Galatano.
Thank you, Jordan, for that really nice introduction. I don't know where you went. There you are. I'm really excited to be here today to meet so many young women who are passionate about science, technology, engineering, and math, and medicine, the second M. And what better place to host an event like this than the BIO5, which is a pillar of STEM research at the U of A and is also run by a female director, Dr. Jennifer Barton. It's an honor to be invited here to give this keynote address and to share with you some of my experiences with the hope that they can in any way influence you to pursue a career that will fulfill your goals. And what are those goals? So some of you may know precisely what they are. Others may still be undecided. And you may wonder, what kind of career will be interesting, not only during college and graduate school, but for years and even decades afterwards. What can I do that will earn me enough money to live comfortably, but that will also allow me to pursue my passion? What career will allow me to keep learning and trying new things and growing? How can I have an impact on people's lives? How can I make a difference in the world? So these are the kind of questions that I was asking when I was in your shoes. And actually, I'm still asking them today. And so that's one of the things that I love most about what I do. My job is to ask questions, and the bigger and more interesting, the better. And the really incredibly cool thing is that I can get money to design experiments to answer those questions. So you might be wondering, what was my first experience that made me know that I was interested in pursuing this trajectory? So the first experience that I remember that planted this idea in my mind to become a physician was when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and I visited my best friend in the hospital. And I was really impressed with how the nurses got to spend a lot of time with my friend. So when I got home that evening, I told my parents, gee, maybe I'd like to become a nurse. And my father, in his very unique and supportive and encouraging way, said to me, "Nurse? What do you mean nurse? Be a doctor." I didn't figure out that I wanted to be a scientist until a few years later. I had an amazing AP biology teacher in my junior year of high school, and for one of the assignments that she gave us, I read a paper, an article about sleep and dreaming. And in this article, the authors hypothesized that this common experience that many of you may have experienced, I think it's pretty common, experience in our dreams where we are threatened by some danger, right? And we go to run away and we can't move. That maybe that is based in the fact that the body is in a paralyzed state during the phase of REM sleep, which is when we do most of our active and vivid dreaming. So that idea that the physical state of the body could influence the content of our dreams, which is essentially the mind, was incredibly fascinating to me. And that's what got me interested in pursuing neuroscience. So I chose to go to a college where I could get involved in research, and just like Jordan is doing here at BIO5. I worked in a biopsychology laboratory, and we studied a region of the brain called the hypothalamus, and particular cells in this area. We were interested in how they monitor the status of the body to know when you're thirsty or when you need to drink water, and then tell you, hey, I'm thirsty. By the end of college, I was completely hooked on research, but I didn't know that much about the world of clinical practice or clinical research. So I applied for an undergraduate internship in psychiatry research at the University of Pittsburgh, and spent the summer working with a team led by physician scientists there who were asking a question of how we can intervene to decrease the rates of suicide in teenagers. By the end of that summer, I had decided to apply to MD-PhD programs to get training that would allow me to help treat human illnesses in the immediate term by caring for patients, but also to try and discover the biology that leads to these illnesses so we can try to prevent them in the longer term. So during my interviews for MD-PhD programs, I told my interviewers that I believed that my clinical work would inform my research and my research would inform my clinical work. So I want to tell you a little bit now, transition through the many years of medical school, graduate training in neuroscience, residency in psychiatry, and postdoctoral fellowship, and tell you a little bit about the research that we're doing now and the surprising event that happened when I realized, hey, that thing that I told the interviewers really happened. So in psychiatry, we are way behind other areas of medicine that have already discovered many of the genes that cause the illnesses that they study. In contrast, in psychiatry, we haven't yet identified a single gene that's known to cause any of the illnesses that we work on, that we treat. These are problems like depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, and substance dependence, which affect nearly 1 in 5 adults in the United States. That was 46.6 million people in 2017. But we have made huge advances in the last 2 decades. There are several reasons that it's been difficult to identify the causes of mental illnesses. The first is that genes aren't the only factor that influences the risk for mental illnesses. In fact, if one of a pair of identical twins develops schizophrenia, the other twin only has a 50 to 70% chance of getting the illness. So that means that the other 30 to 50% is determined by something else. And our leading hypothesis at this point is that it's environment. Another challenge that we have in psychiatry is we haven't identified any genes yet, but we know there isn't going to be just one gene for schizophrenia or even a handful. What we already know is there's at least 145 different regions of the genome where there are variations that increase an individual's risk to get schizophrenia. So we're dealing with a problem of many genes and the effective environment. That makes this what we call a complex genetic disorder. Finally, another major obstacle that we have in psychiatry is that there are no biological markers for our illnesses. Instead, we diagnose psychiatric illnesses by interviewing patients and by looking for symptoms that they describe and signs or behaviors that they display. And an added problem is that these signs and symptoms that they have aren't unique for one illness. For example, you could have difficulty concentrating because of depression, or because you have difficulty focusing in ADHD, or as a symptom of mania in bipolar disorder, or it could be an example of a cognitive deficit in schizophrenia. So for all these reasons, it's been very difficult to try to study these disorders and identify their causes. So I'm going to transition to slides right now and tell you a little bit about the work that we do in the lab. Thank you. Okay, so we've decided in my lab that the way that we're going to try to address this question of how events in the environment like stress that we know increase risk for mental illnesses, how those can affect the brain and cause the changes that we think underlie these mental illnesses. So what we do is we examine what's going on here in this black box in the middle. And what's happening there is activation of a family of genes that are called immediate early genes. What are they? They are the first set of genes, and what this represents is a gene in the genome, in your DNA. They're the first set of genes to be activated in response to a stimulus to the cell. And in the case of neurons, that stimulus is neuronal activity or depolarization. So that causes the gene's mRNA to be expressed, and that gets translated into protein. And in the case of the family of immediate early gene proteins that I study, the EGR family, these proteins act as transcription factors, which means they bind to DNA and turn on and off the next set of genes. So what you can see from this slide is that these genes are uniquely positioned to take events in the environment and translate them into the genes and proteins that get expressed in individual cells in response to that stimulus. And those changes can have long-term effects. What do I mean by that? Things like helping you form memories. And in fact, these genes do play critical roles in memory formation. It turns out they also play important roles in a number of other processes that are dysfunctional in patients with schizophrenia. So what we hypothesized, this is back when I was a postdoc, is that these genes, and here what you're looking at is EGR3, the particular family member that we've studied most, that these genes are activated it turns out, downstream of a number of other proteins that had been implicated in risk for schizophrenia, like the NMDA receptor, and at the time, calcineurin and neuregulin-1 and ERB4. So what we hypothesized, or what I hypothesized during my postdoc, was that maybe these genes actually form a biological pathway that's critical for normal neurobiological functioning to do things like make memories. And if you disrupt it at any level, and by disrupting the function of any of these genes, that could increase your risk for mental illnesses like schizophrenia. And because this whole process is activated by environmental events like stress, it can take into account that environmental component as well. So that's what we study. And we found lots of exciting results to support this hypothesis. So one of the ways that I started asking how we could see if indeed this pathway does play a role in symptoms like schizophrenia was to study mice that lack the gene EGR3. And we hypothesized they should have abnormal behaviors like other animal models of schizophrenia, and indeed they do. So the next thing that we decided was if we can give a drug that we use to treat schizophrenia, it should make those symptoms better. And in fact, it does, ameliorates those abnormalities. But along the way, we discovered another really cool effect. And that's shown here, if you could start the slide. So what you're looking at here is 4 mice. This one, number 4, is a wild-type mouse. And these 3 lack the gene for EGR3, so-called EGR3 knockout mice. This mouse got 7 milligrams per kilogram of clozapine, an antipsychotic medication, and 2 of these 3 other EGR3 knockout mice got the same dose of drug as the wild-type mouse. And what you can see is a very different effect in these 2 groups based on the genotype. And so this was really exciting to me because as a psychiatrist, this was an aha thing. I said, oh my goodness, this is like what we see in patients with schizophrenia. They can tolerate much higher doses of these medicines than can healthy individuals. Every once in a while, we have a reason to give somebody who doesn't have schizophrenia a drug like this. And so that was my first realization that, hey, gee, that thing that I told the interviewers in my MD PhD interviews, that my clinical work is going to inform my science, it really happened. So what we've done, fast forward here, is we used a bunch of techniques in the first couple of years that I had my own lab at the University of Arizona up in Phoenix to decipher what was going on in these mice that might account for this effect. And what we found was that indeed we could replicate the effect with a drug that selectively targeted a particular kind of neurotransmitter receptor, the serotonin 2A receptor. And when we looked in the mice, they had low levels of this receptor. They were deficient. Turns out, and this is just sort of a picture of what that looks like. I don't know if you can tell, but wild-type mice have this much, EGR3 knockouts have less. And the cool thing was when we looked in the literature, we found that there's lots of different studies that say that patients with schizophrenia also have low levels of this receptor in their brains. So we thought, gee, wouldn't it be interesting if we could see if the same thing was happening in humans? In other words, that this low level of serotonin 2A receptor may be responsible for the reason that schizophrenia patients don't get as sedated by this drug. So the first thing that we did was we tested whether the mice were really sleepy, because you look, the mouse isn't moving, but we can't tell if it's sleeping. So we collaborated with a group that does EEGs in mice, and what we found was this really interesting phenomenon. What you're looking at here basically is 2 EEG leads and the spectral power, and along the x-axis here is time, and you're looking at 6 hours. And we see this depression in the alpha rhythm in the wild-type mice after they get clozapine that we never saw in the EGR3 knockout mice. So all you need to take from this is that this is a biologically measurable difference that we can see. So we hypothesized maybe we can use this finding and translate it to humans. And that term, translational research, means when we take findings in our basic science lab and try to apply it to humans with the goal of trying to understand illness and maybe create new treatments. So what we hypothesized was that what we observed from the animal studies is we give the drug to the animals, wild-type normal animals fall asleep, and EGR3 knockout animals stay awake. We know that this results in a specific EEG pattern in the wild-type mice that we don't see in the EGR3 knockouts, and we know that the wild-type mice have low levels of serotonin 2A receptors, but the EGR3 the wild-type mice have normal levels, by definition because they're wild type, and the EGR3 knockouts have low levels. So how would we translate to humans? We expect if we give the drug to somebody and they fall asleep, that their EEG is going to look something like this. We have to figure out what that looks like in humans. And if we give it to somebody with schizophrenia, based on this clinical observation, they're going to stay awake, and we hope that what we'll see is a similar thing that we saw in the mice, where their EEG doesn't show this effect. And we predict that both of these things relate to the level of serotonin 2A receptors that that they have in their brains. So we've actually already started this study, and we have done mostly controls. It's been a totally educational experience for me. There's been all kinds of steps in this process that we didn't anticipate, and I see that I'm running way over, so I apologize. The exciting news is that, maybe we're going to be able to develop a biologically based test for schizophrenia that can be administered by somebody who's not an expert. In other words, if we can correlate how sleepy people get in response to the drug by a simple checklist, we won't have to do the biological measures, and we can assert or conclude with a high degree of confidence that this person is likely to have schizophrenia or not. And maybe they're likely to have a subtype of schizophrenia that's characterized by low 2A receptors. And that might help us track that individual to a treatment that's found to be better and more effective for that subtype of schizophrenia earlier. So still in progress. So I want to thank you for inviting me, and hopefully this has given you guys an idea of what kinds of things that you can do with your future directions in STEM. And then finally, in science, we always want to thank the people that actually do the work. When we're PIs, it's not us anymore, but it's all these fantastic people, undergraduates, graduates, students, high school students even, and postdocs in the lab. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Galatano. Now, I would like to introduce Lisa Romero, Senior Director of Public Affairs, Communications, and Engagement for BIO5 Institute, who will serve as the moderator for the panel portion.
I can't operate a microphone. So hello, everybody. Thank you, Jordan, and Dr. Galatano. Pretty awesome, right? Thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the BIO5 Institute, I'd like to thank you for being here. For those of you that don't know what BIO5 is, it's a very unique place that we are all very lucky to work at. Here, there's an equal focus on both cutting-edge STEM research and discovery, paired with a mission to engage students in inspiring ways. One of the best parts of working at a university for me is seeing firsthand what our next generation is capable of and being part of their journey in some small way. That's what today is about. I'd like to say a special thank you to Lexi Carbine. Lexi was the person in the video you saw when you came in, and she was a BIO5 student ambassador last year, and she was curious and creative, and she used her vision to shape that inaugural Inspiring Women event that we had last year, and that was her ambassador project. She put this event together. She really just envisioned something that would bring people in a room like all of you and showcase the inspiring women we have here. Now Jordan, who you also met, will be carrying that torch forward, co-leading our new ambassadors in the upcoming school year. It's fitting that just a few weeks ago, on February 11th, it was the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, an annual commemoration developed by the World Women's Health and Development Forum in February of 2015. Since then, it has continued as a celebration of the achievements of women and girls in STEM fields and as a time to support efforts that increase
gender parity in education and careers in science, engineering, math, and technology. As our University of Arizona President Robbins has consistently stated, this is a truly important issue for our university and one where our success is critical for the future of our state. In order to develop the workforce of the future, the U of A must encourage women and girls to explore STEM disciplines and give them opportunities for advancement and career success. We're very lucky at the U of A to have inspiring role models who have navigated successful STEM careers and journeys of their own, and in turn, share their earned wisdom by mentoring students in their labs and classes and offices and through forums like this one. We also have so many promising STEM students, eager and ready to learn and engage in ways that will shape their own paths. With that, I'd like to invite our panelists to the stage, and then once they're settled, we'll begin. So panelists, would you come forward? Oh yeah, sorry. Now they're on the spot. So I'm going to have each of the panelists briefly introduce themselves. We're going to go down through the line and share with our guests who you are, a little bit about why you do what you do. And we'll take about three to 4 minutes each to do that, and then we're going to go on to some other specific questions. So Dr. Meredith, we'll start with you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Laura Meredith. I am an assistant professor here in the School of Natural Resources and the Environment, and I was hired into a group of people here in BIO5 studying ecosystem genomics, which means we are trying to study ecosystems through a genomic lens. We want to understand the genomes of microbes, of plants, of animals, and try to predict the way that they behave in the Earth system and study really grand challenges we have in the Earth system. My background is actually in atmospheric chemistry, but I became very interested in the role of soil microorganisms in controlling the composition of our atmosphere and participating in really important fluxes of greenhouse gases in and out of the atmosphere. And why I do what I do, I come from a family with 3 sisters and no brothers. And I think we just always were really passionate about the natural world, and there was never any question of why we wouldn't reach as far as we could. And I really have always loved science. I love asking questions. I love getting into the world with instrumentation and using instruments to see the invisible in the world, which includes the composition of our air and microbial life. And so I think it's just, I like the challenge, and I like getting in there and really doing the work. And so that's what drives me.
Dr. Barton?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Barton. I'm the director here at BIO5, and I'm also a professor in biomedical engineering. I work on building miniature devices to detect ovarian cancer early and also look at other cancers as well. So why do I do this? I love to build things. And what's amazing to me is how, as human beings, we can come in and we can create things. We can make the world a better place. And I'm not particular about what I build. So I love to build little endoscopes, and I love to watch the students in my lab build little endoscopes even more. And I love the fact that we can create a device that might save a life or make a life better. But I also love to build teams. To me, there's nothing more exciting than when you bring people together and you get a result that's more than just the sum of all its parts. I love to build confidence and knowledge in the trainees who are in the lab, and I just love to build things that make the world a better place. I like to create, I like to add to the world, and so that all comes together in my multiple roles, and I think is what ties them together.
Lisbeth?
I'm Lisbeth Hallheim. I'm an undergrad here at the University of Arizona, and I study neuroscience. I also work in Dr. Lee Ryan's Cognition and Neuroimaging Lab, where I do research looking at the relationship between genes and structures in the brain. So I use MRI to do that, and I look at different changes in aging and in degeneration as people grow older. I also am the ambassador in the ambassador program here, where I learn about the relationship between business and science. And I do what I do just because I find neuroscience specifically very interesting, and I'm very attracted to the idea of finding ways to help doctors help patients in the future. So,
Emily?
Hi, my name is Emily Merritt. I am a graduate student in the Koshi lab in the immunobiology department. In our lab, we study the parasite Toxoplasma gondii, so it's a parasite that infects the brain. I'm in graduate school, so when everyone's saying what they do, I mean, I don't exactly know what I'm going to do yet, but I know that I'm in graduate school because I like asking questions. I think that's an underlying theme here. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know that I like learning. I like interacting with other people, sharing ideas. I like answering questions. So wherever that takes me, I know it'll be somewhere good, and I'll like it. So,
Dr. Stock?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia Stock. I was born and raised in Argentina and educated as well. I came to U.S. to complete my research during my PhD, and then I stayed for personal reasons, built my family here. I've been at the University of Arizona for 18 years. I can't believe it myself that it's taking so long. I started, I never thought I would stay here for this long, and now I'm here to stay forever, as long as the university wants to give me. But So I was hired as a spousal hire, and so with that, for people that don't know, I face different challenges because I was a non-tenure track person on a year-to-year renewed in my appointments, and so I needed to work really very hard to do what I wanted to do. My expertise is I'm a biologist and a parasitologist by training. I use invertebrates as model systems to understand host microbe interactions in the mutualistic and the pathogenic way. So I had to push very hard to make it where I am. I'm currently the director of the School of Animal and Comparative Biomedical Sciences. I'm a faculty there and faculty joint appointment also in entomology, plant sciences, and a member of BIO5. And I do what I do because throughout my career, even coming at the U of A, and as a graduate student, many people told me no to the things that I wanted to do. And when someone tells me no, and that I'm giving wrong hints to my administrators, that actually turns me on for wanting to do what I really want to do. And so I push very hard for that, and I want to empower women to make things happen for them. And I like to take even the students that are challenging because I want to make them stars and be proud of that.
Dr. Craig?
Hi, so Patricia is my boss. I'm going to ask her to not give me a raise, ever. So I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, so Puerto Rican person here. We seem to be everywhere. So I am an associate professor in the School of Animal and Comparative Biomedical Sciences. And I study poison, so I'm a crazy poison lady, or in other words, a toxicologist. In my lab, what we're interested in is things that can act as poisons to the reproductive system and steal the fertility of women. So one of our goals is to be able to understand how different chemicals in the environment are able to trick our body into, not working well and not being able to have, healthy babies and continuing our families. And this passion came up because as an undergraduate student, I did a summer research experience in a toxicology lab, and I had the realization that even though, most of the time we think that some people cannot have children because they have a genetic defect, or they're they're past their prime in years, or they were exposed to possibly an exposure when they were young, that the fact that the environment can be silently stealing your fertility was very, very upsetting to me, and I said I want to contribute to this. And the reason why I went into science, so I knew a little bit that I wanted to go into science before I had that realization. That helped me pick my field. But before that, I used to get in trouble for mixing my mom's makeup and chemicals in the shower. So when I was in middle school and high school, I would take like really long showers, and all I was doing was mixing baby powder with shampoo and conditioner, and then I would steal my mom's makeup and add to that and see what it looked like. And I had always felt, that curiosity to see what happens. If I do this, what happens? And whenever there's a problem, I always wanted to be the one to solve it. And if I couldn't do it myself, I always tried to find somebody to help me do it. So I knew that there was something in there that I wanted to be a problem solver. I wanted to be a detective. I wanted to be a scientist. And later on, I discovered what field I was interested in.
Thank you, Dr. Craig. Let's have you pass the microphone down. So next, we're going to ask each of our panelists a question, and they can have about 5 minutes or so to give us some insights on the particular question. After that, we're going to spend some time answering a final question at the end. So we've got some good content to come. So we're going to start again with Dr. Meredith. What are some unique struggles and opportunities you've experienced throughout your career as a woman in STEM?
So as it says up on the slide there, one of the roles that I took on just a year into being a brand new assistant professor here was taking on leadership of the tropical rainforest at Biosphere 2. So this is a biome that we have 45 minutes north of here, and they're really looking for new leadership to bring in the research component in a really heavy way and kind of stimulate and kickstart research there. And I think already as a new assistant professor, you can feel happy to have the job and confident in some of your past experiences, but you may not be so ready to be a leader, even if you like being a leader. It's a new role, and throughout graduate school and a postdoc, you see a lot of people like you who have that role. And so as you start to become a leader and be the one in charge, it can be a combination of your own insecurities as well as the way the world is receiving women as leaders that can make you sometimes feel uncomfortable or not know how to proceed. And so not only did I take on being a new assistant professor and running my own group and hiring people and giving people really direct advice as a professor for the first time, I took on this role at Biosphere 2, and it was really challenging for me, and in some cases, not knowing if my leadership was being taken seriously or if they just wanted to bring a woman into the role for the look of it. And I had big ideas and really just wanted to do this. Like, if I take something on, I'm gonna go big. I'm not gonna just take it on for the title. So I was fortunate to collaborate with some other women in leadership from Europe. So full professor from Freiburg, Germany, as well as a junior professor there. 3-women team, we created a huge collaboration, and we just ran this really big drought experiment at Biosphere 2 that brought in about $5 million of instrumentation, 90 participants. It was a 5-month drought experiment. We got a lot of press. I think we've had over 20 different articles and stories about it. And so it was very successful, but all along the way there are a lot of challenges to just filling the shoes of a leader and to getting used to that and to really owning what you really feel is right and moving forward in that direction. And so I think that was a challenge, but in the end it's really paid off. I think women, we can have a very nice collaborative leadership style that really brings people out and brings the best out of people. And we have over 50% women in this whole collaboration. So I'm really excited to, now that we've wrapped up today, got Julian in the back there, who just finished shipping the rest of our instrumentation back to our collaborators in Germany. So really excited to see all the papers come out and the future success from this. So yeah, I would just say, I think as women, we're born leaders, but it can feel uncomfortable sometimes to fill those shoes. But we have this, and I think we're very fortunate to have a lot of people in front of us who have paved the way, and we will continue to make that path even wider for women in the future. So that's me, yeah.
So I should have mentioned this at the beginning. We're gonna move through the questions and let the panelists answer them, but we're gonna have tons of time at the end for any of you to ask questions, both as a group and then one-on-one to be networking with the women afterwards. So please just know you're going to have time for all your questions. Maybe just jot down notes if you have them. So next we're going to ask Dr. Barton, at any point in your education or career, did you ever want to change your direction? And if so, what were your intimidation factors, if there were any, and how did you overcome those?
So I had a little bit of a different experience than some people have. In many ways, I was extremely fortunate. I came from a family with a long line of engineers. My mom was not an engineer. She was only a chemistry and math major. So I was told I was going to be an engineer. And so I didn't have to overcome, family pressures to not go into a STEM field. As a matter of fact, I had family pressures to go into it and specifically to be an engineer. So I did that, although I can't really say that my heart was in it. Engineering was at the time and still is in some fields rather dry. I think a lot of the curricula is outdated. I think it's not very interesting. The applications aren't necessarily made as evident as they should be, which is strange because engineering is all about building a better world. And so I went through an electrical engineering program, and this was in the 80s. So in the 80s, pre-computer, I had a TRS-80, if anybody's heard of that, where you put the cassette tape in and you can type a couple of things. So it was before there was really the ability to get these neat tools you have nowadays, like Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and things that kids can take and program and do. But it was too late for vacuum tubes, and it was really too late to be able to work on your car, because once the emission controls of the 1970s got in, cars got really, really complicated. They didn't want you working on them anymore. So here I was. My father was very nice. He showed me how to wire a telephone. If any of you all still have landlines, do any of you even know what that is anymore? Right, he did show me how to wire up a telephone jack and do a couple of things like that. But basically, I had very little practical experience. I went through 4 years of an electrical engineering curriculum. I learned a heck of a lot of math. I learned how to do Bode plots. I learned how to do things like this. The labs were frankly abysmal, okay, and this is from one of the top 10 engineering schools in the country, where you spent half your time trying to get the equipment to work because undergrads weren't important, right? So I graduated with an electrical engineering degree. I was fortunate to get a job at McDonnell Douglas on the space station program because it was just starting up. Very cool sounding. I got there, I was doing paperwork engineering. I was doing a lot of specification writing. We weren't yet to the stage of making hardware. All of a sudden I realized I'm supposed to be an engineer and I don't know the least thing about building something. And I had a bit of a crisis then, as to whether or not I was just doing this because my family expected it of me. I really didn't face any hostility as a woman. It was more coming from inside of me of, what do I want to do? Why am I here? Why am I doing this? I did have a feeling, though, that there was something right about engineering, that it did match me, and that goes back to what I said at the beginning. I do like to build things, so I was going to have to figure out how to do that. So that didn't happen until I went back and got my PhD. So I finally decided to quit work, go back, enter the field of biomedical engineering, which is, all engineers help people, but biomedical engineers very, very directly help people, and I like that aspect. I got into a lab, and I went, oh my gosh, I have to build something now. Fortunately, I was very lucky to have some very patient senior graduate students and a wonderful mentor who helped me through that. And I just kind of built the skills. So I stuck with it, and now I feel like my dreams of what I thought engineering could be have come true, and I really am enjoying it. So I'm glad I stuck with it. So all of you there, if you're having a hard time with something or it doesn't seem to be exactly what you wanted, I just encourage you to think about it and figure out maybe, I didn't change directions completely. I just went down a slightly different path that was much more productive.
Thank you, Dr. Barton. So Lisbeth, talk about the path that led you to become a STEM undergraduate at the University of Arizona. Why did you choose STEM, and why did you choose U of A? And what about your passion for the future? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'll start with this, why I got into STEM in the first place. when I was little, I was really into the ocean, and so I wanted to be a marine biologist, even though I grew up, born and raised in Kansas, which is not the most conducive to that. But I went for it. I applied to an internship early in high school, and I went and I worked in a marine lab, and it was really interesting. You know, I didn't mind the kind of the repetitiveness of science. I was interested in that, but I wasn't inspired by the questions being asked. You know, it wasn't for me. And so I kind of left, and I was like, all right, well, I don't know what else there is. I should probably start looking. And so a few years went by, and I found myself at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. I had been struggling with a neurological disorder for a while, and I was just in a waiting room in the pediatric neurology center, and I was sitting there, and this little girl came out, her and her mother, and the little girl was paralyzed. She was, hooked up to a lot of medical equipment, and kind of, when you see stuff like that, you kind of have this impulse as a human to another human to help. You want to offer aid. And so I felt that, and it kind of went through to my head. I was like, all right, well, there's nothing I can do as another patient to help people. And so then I kind of went, all right, well, what if I was a clinician? What if I was a doctor? And I kind of ran into the problem as like, well, we're here for that. And a lot of people leave and they still don't have answers. There's a lot to go, especially in neurology. We have a lot to learn still. And so I kind of landed on research, which is, kind of paving the way and wanting to, make tools and find more information to help doctors so they can better help patients. And so that's kind of how I ended up in that field. As for University of Arizona, I actually am a transfer student. I transferred last semester from a little college in Oregon. And I transferred because of the QTR. I don't know if any of you know what that is, but it's the Qualified Tuition Reduction, which is for staff. You get a really great tuition deal. And I was really happy to actually be here because there's an excellent neuroscience department. There's all this amazing, medical research. And so I kind of, it was serendipity. I don't know if that's the right way to use that word, but it worked out very well for me. And so that's how I ended up here. Yeah.
Thank you. So Emily, in your experience thus far, talk about the importance of having a strong mentor or mentors to help you navigate a career in STEM, and how in turn to give back in terms of mentorship.
Wow. Okay. So I am really lucky. I have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful female mentor, Anita Koshi, here in BIO5. When I was doing rotations, one thing that stood out to me was working for a woman, because I felt like she would have insight to a lot of problems that I may have in my future, that I thought that if I had a male PI, that he would be less understanding of, or just, it wouldn't be, some of the issues I might have would not be something that he had experienced or would even know how to help me tackle if he would be willing to. So she has been, having a strong mentor is really important because they help you make decisions when they're the right decision, but when you're stubborn and you don't want to give in. That's kind of vague. I needed to take a leave of absence, and I think a lot of us put a lot of effort into what we do, and we put pride into the fact that we, I'm in a PhD program, I'm a female, this is a challenging thing. You tell people you're getting your doctorate, they're like, oh, you must be smart. I'm like, no, you just work hard, that's all it is. But it's nice to have someone that is willing to separate herself in the fact that if I needed to take time for personal matters, a lot of PIs would not be open to that or even push you to that, even though it's for your own emotional health, because that means that then you're not doing work for them. So it's great to have a mentor that is going to help put you first and help to see that the decisions that you need to make, help support them even though it doesn't benefit them. And what was the other part of my question about mentors?
How are you going to turn that around?
Oh, how am I going to turn that around?
Be a mentor?
Oh.
Or how are you a mentor?
I think that in a way I will, I'm an empathetic person, and I really appreciate the fact that people care about other people. For example, with Anita, I feel like if I was in any other PI in my department, I probably would have been kicked out of my program by now. Again, vague. Maybe I'll get to some of that stuff later. But she, I think that it's just realizing that this is a job. We're in science. We're here because we love it and it matters to us. But at the same time, we are people and we have things that are going on in our lives outside of, school. And so taking that into consideration, maybe I am a lot more empathetic towards others than some PIs or future PIs or even grad student mentors are. If my grad student or my undergrad has an issue with something, I'm like, oh, it's okay, it's life, We deal with that. We roll with the punches. You can't expect everything to be calculated and for life to go exactly as you expect. So, yeah, I would say, continued empathy would be me.
Awesome, thank you. So Dr. Stock, have you experienced gender bias in your field? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Probably throughout my academic career with professors, colleagues, staff members, people above me, below me, in my positions. And I have always tried to stay myself positive and reverse the negativism to something positive and ensure, these people that I'm a woman, but because I'm a woman, I'm not someone less, and I'm not someone who cannot do it. And I'm not someone that needs to be belittled or diminished by any other way. So it's kind of like what I said before, is that no for an answer that triggers I'm going to go after this, right? And I think it's something that you can avoid because it's out of your person and your control, and then all of a sudden you face it. It is frustrating, and I try always not to take it personal because it's obviously not my problem, it's the other person's problem, and seeing a difference that, in fact, yes, there is difference in gender, but there's not difference in the capabilities that a woman can and do in their career. In fact, I always consider myself a feminist. I have had randomly more women in my lab than men, but all men are, of course, welcome. But I feel like I always like to empower women and give them the chance to succeed and be successful. I always say, you tell me where your goals are, and I'll help you do that jump to go to the next level. As a mentor, I feel like I need to do that, and I will continue to do that. Even in my role now as a school director, I have a broader spectrum to deal with sex bias at many different levels, not only directed to my person, but directed to my employees, to my students. And I always like to be very attentive and aware and be open to listen to what's going on to women, in my case, in my surroundings, to try to control that. And just, like I said, try to not take it personal and don't feel like, it's not, of course, your problem, it's that person's problem. But, like the old saying post-war or during Second World War says, yes, we can do it, right?
Great, thank you. The loss of the individual, questions for Dr. Craig. As a woman in the demanding STEM arena, what advice can you give on balancing your career and family life and other interests? Balance being
This is a big responsibility. I'm nervous giving advice. Well, I will start with a disclaimer. Number one is that I can't claim that I've been able to accomplish all the things I'm going to say. I'm currently working on them, and I think part of the advice sometimes is reflecting on what things have you struggled with to let other people know that those things could happen. And number two, there's 4 things, so please remind me that there were 4 if I forget. So the first one, I realized that we have a very diverse audience here. So some of you are at the before family stage, and some of you are at the already have a family stage or planning. So for those of you that are before having the family stage, and family I define as a husband and offspring, whatever that is, furry or not furry. I'm talking about pets, not the husband, okay? So I say that to have a plan, okay? So a plan is starting to think about things like, what are my family plans? Do I have family goals? Do I want to have children? Do I want to be married? Whatever order you choose to do that. And also asking yourself, what are your career goals? So you will have this knowledge. You'll know what are your family goals and what are your career goals, and then you can start thinking about creative and reasonable ways in which you can achieve bringing those 2 things together in your life in an effective, satisfying way. So for those of you that don't have the family yet, I think you need to start, drafting that plan in your mind and putting these 2 things together. For those of you that already have the family, including myself, I would like to say that just be realistic. Balance? I don't think that happens. You need to be realistic. It's not going to be perfect, okay? It's not going to be perfect. There will be days when you're going to be extremely successful at work and your house is going to look like a rat's nest, including dirty children. And there will be some days where you're going to fold all the laundry and you're going to finish that science fair project with your child, and then you're going to come to work and be a total mess the rest of the week because you're so delayed in everything, or you're going to freak out because you didn't write 3 grants this weekend. So be realistic. It's not perfect. Even the best Academy Award-winning movies, when you look at the raw footage, they have hundreds and hundreds of errors, yet we don't see those. So a lot of people that you look up to, you're going to see their best product. You're not going to see all the mistakes and all the mishaps that happen. So have that in mind. It's not perfect. Number 3, I think, is rule number 49 in Zombieland 2, which is get backup. Have backup. And in this sense, I mean it in 2 different ways. Have people in your network that are going to mentor you. Find people that will give you advice and listen to it. These people should be people that have been in your career and or people that actually have been successful at having a family, whatever your goal is, to emulate what they've done and get advice from them. Listen to their advice. And number 4, right? I remember number 4. Yeah, and now I can't remember what number 4 was. It's like a substitute, kind of thing. Let's see, what was it? I seriously can't remember. And
Have
it was
to
not
do
meant
with
to
the
be
dogs?
Did it have to do with dogs? No. This is so funny. I forget. I feel old. Maybe don't forget things that you plan to say during a panel.
We can
Actually,
come back to you.
I can say, let's put it this way. There were 3, and I just made up number 4.
We can come back to you as well. Thank you, Dr. Craig. I think that's pretty refreshing to feel like I'm not the only one who doesn't have it all together or ever have it together.
Oh, yeah, that's the most important one. It's scheduling. Everything is scheduled nowadays. So I don't look like a crazy lady screaming from the front of the room. In the never-ending scheduling effort that we all go through, make sure that you schedule time to have fun and do something that will be satisfying to you. Either nap, kickboxing, reading, dancing. I do Zumba. Yeah, it's very massage. It is very important to schedule some time, and the number 1 rule for that is find the time, schedule it, and stick to it. Do not cancel it, okay? That's very, very important. Take time for yourself, okay?
I don't know about you, but one thing I just got from all of that also that nobody mentioned, but is try to keep a sense of humor as you're dealing with life, because it's tough some days. So thank you all for that. So with this last piece, I'm going to ask each of our panelists, and actually I'd love Dr. Galatano to answer as well if she would like. And that's just, please leave us with one piece of advice for aspiring women in STEM. You may have already alluded to that piece of advice, and you might want to elaborate, or it might be something more serious, more funny, more personal, more professional. But just if you could leave the audience with sort of one thing to think about, what would that be?
So I think my thing would be to remain a little bit selfish. Like, throughout your career, you'll do a lot of things for other people, and you'll be asked to do a lot of things, a lot of paperwork, a lot of, I don't know, just so many things are asked of you that it can become easy to feel compelled to do everything for everyone else. And to also start to feel desperate, like to be successful, you should follow every single opportunity that comes along. But really, you know, we work really hard, we're talented, we should do the things that we want to do and make us feel excited. And that means write the grants, design the projects, pick a thesis project that you want to do and that you're going to be passionate about and that's going to keep you excited, because this is for you. This is your life, and work with people that you like to work with and who support you and that you can have fun with when you're doing the work. Because really, like, we shouldn't be doing this just for someone else. We need to be, like, at our core doing this for ourselves. So yeah, keep yourself in mind would be my main advice.
Awesome.
So I had about 50 items and I had to pick one, mostly because not really because I'm that great at giving advice, but because I want to give it to myself to remember to do more often. But one I didn't think anybody else would pick up on, so this is it. You've probably heard the phrase, fake it till you make it, right? This is the idea that you can put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and you can just kind of pretend you know what you're doing until you are desperately trying to figure it out and you learn it and then you really do. And actually, that's fine, but I want to let you in on a little secret. Anybody who's doing anything interesting at all is faking it all the time. So it's true.
So
they don't
no making it.
actually know. You don't, because once you get to the point where you've desperately learned and you figured out what you're doing, then it's really no longer interesting, right? Why would you bother? Why would you bother doing something boring that you already knew how to do and was there? So what this meant for me was that you have a constant drive. Push yourself, get yourself out of your comfort zone, do something new. It's perfectly fine to fake it. Now, don't do brain surgery if you're not certified, but you know what I mean. Get yourself, and it's okay if you don't actually know how to do everything. It's all right. And go ahead and push yourself that way. Other people are doing it too. And get back up, right? It's okay if you don't necessarily know how to do everything. Form a team around yourself that does. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's going to, if you're going to make a mark on the world, if you're going to do something that really is satisfying to yourself, you're going to be uncomfortable a lot.
So I think my advice would just be try not to be the limiting factor in your own life. You know, I think there are plenty of limitations that come at you from the world and from other people. And I think it's really hard not to kind of self-correct. Usually you're wrong about the self-correction, and you think about applying to something or, putting yourself out there and you're like, oh, I'm not qualified for this, or, there are going to be other people that are better for this. And I think, sometimes that's going to be true and you'll be rejected because other people will make that choice. But I think it's really important to try to allow yourself to learn that way and try to, not be the one holding yourself back, because I think sometimes you'll surprise yourself with the things that other people believe you can do. And then, and from there work hard, but, you have to try. And so being able to put yourself out there and being comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think is really important.
I think that it's important to realize that it's good to set a goal and to work towards that goal, but realize that there's going to be speed bumps along the way all the time, and to not get disheveled or upset with yourself if everything isn't going according to plan. And that it's also a lot of times we think, okay, I'm going to do this in 5 years. I'm going to have this accomplished. 10 years, I'm going to have this accomplished. I just need to head down, eyes forward, grind through. And a lot of times, so we'll tell ourselves that that's what we need to do. But really, it's more about, like, our life is about getting to that goal, right? So appreciate the things that set you back. Like, it's the small things that we tend to learn from. So don't not be so focused on getting to the end goal that you don't appreciate the journey. Yeah, I think that'd probably be mine.
I think I'm going to go back to my original introduction and say, don't say no to yourself. You know, life is 50-50, right? And I always tell my students when they say, should I apply to this? Should I do that? And I say, why not? You know, don't say no, but say why not? Because why are you going to tell yourself not to do something? Why are you going to be afraid of pushing the envelope a little bit further, jumping into the water and swimming when you don't see the shore, you know, close to you? I see that in my career I did that. I did many things boldly, and I didn't know what the next step was. And a lot of people get stressed about trying to see. I see life as a long chain, right? With many links connected to each other. And sometimes we rush to see the end of the chain, to see if there's a charm or whatever pendant or fancy thing it is. And we forget to live the present life and connect the dots. And so I have two sons, one 23 and the other one 17. And I understand very well at that age, the future is far away, but you want everything now. And you need to understand that success doesn't happen right away. You know, it's a lifelong process with a lot of pain and challenges, but you know, you need to keep yourself positive and optimistic about that. But take a breath, relax, connect the links, you know, and don't feel like because you were not successful today, this is the end of the story. Because if you think that way, you are saying no to yourself. You know, when the door closes, yes, people tell us there are many opens, and I can tell you for sure that that is the truth. And sometimes there are doors and holes or any other entry that you never conceived it was going to happen, and it opens, and that lands you into a wonderful environment. And the interesting thing about our careers is that we don't need to punch a clock to come and do things, that we are always creating. So take advantage of the wonderful benefits that careers in STEM have. And like I said to my students, the sky is the limit. So just keep pushing and being positive about what you do in your life.
Okay, with all that advice and the 4 that I already dished out, I'm kind of running low. But I just wanted to say, one thing is, and this is something that I tell my daughters all the time, and it's know what you're good at, do an effort to identify what that is, identify what things you really enjoy, and then go for it. And if it seems at some point that it's not gonna happen, just continue trying, because that's what you're good at, and that's what you really like. What would you do anything else? And ask. There's something, you know, I learned this with my kids because they will always try to ask mom or ask dad and keep trying. It's like, oh, I just need to ask because one of them is going to say yes. Do the same thing. Be like a 8-year-old and just, you know, one of the common things that women, we do that. We look at something and we look at the requirements, so the qualifications or things that are required for it. And the first thing that we kind of look is at everything that we don't have. Whereas people from the other chromosome world will look at it and be like, oh, human. Yeah, I can do that. I can qualify. I can apply. So just don't doubt yourself. Don't let self-doubt get the best out of you. So identify what you're good at, what you really like, and just go for it. Just keep going, okay?
Wow, right? So with that, we're going to open the floor to any questions you all may have. You can Ask one of the panelists, ask all of them, and if you're comfortable doing it in front of the group, I'm sure that there will be other people wanting to ask the questions that you ask, so please do so. If not, you can certainly stay after and talk to the panelists as well if you'd like to do that more one-on-one. Are we going to take, oh, no, you guys are going to keep this, I guess. So anybody have a question they would like to, Marissa, there's one right here.
Right here. Okay. I get to be the first one. It's really hard. First of all, I want to say thank you. This is a Friday night, and obviously we know you guys are really busy. And I'm thinking I'm giving up a Friday night, and I'm like so glad that I came here. So it's too late for me at this point. I'm a STEM teacher, and I'm inspiring my students to get involved. And I came here to drag my daughter out, so. I get so excited. I want her to come up and talk to every single one of you because you're all like so amazing. So my big question is like, as we're here and trying to decide who do we talk to and what are the questions, what's the start? So you've all had mentors. Like, how do you find a mentor? How do you pick who it is that you want to work with? As a STEM teacher, I'm constantly networking and trying to find people. But as far as tonight, like what's the next? Where do we all start?
Thank you. That's actually a great question, and a question that I always ask to the students that I teach, and also, well, the students in my lab already found me, but I always, when I start the lecture, I said, do you know all the possibilities that we have at the University of Arizona if you want to do research? And a lot of people don't know, and then I ask, have you ever approached someone and look at someone or try to contact them? And most of the students are shy. They don't want to do it, or they don't know how to do it. And I just say, you just have to do it. Break that barrier that you have and just go and introduce yourself. Say, I'm interested in this topic. Do you have, or I like the research that you are doing. Do you have an opening? Or who else I need to talk to. Sometimes it's a word of mouth. A student talks to another student, oh, I'm working in this lab, and then that person says, oh, who is the principal investigator, and you approach that person. But even via email, a phone call, I just make an appointment and make it happen. But take the initiative. You can also look at websites, BIO5, the different departments in all our units and colleges. They have a list of faculty, so you can easily identify by a topic. You just Google a topic or type a topic in a search, and you will find a list of people that are involved, and that will help you connect. And you can do it locally, you can do it, across the state, the country, internationally. Like I told you, I grew up in Argentina, and at that time there was no internet, no computers. So I learned by reading papers and finding the authors, and then sending typewritten letters, and that's how I made it to US, connecting the dots and, interacting with people. In my case, I needed to learn English. I had that, ability with me, so that was not a barrier. But so just, I think when there's a will, there's a way. But don't be shy, because we are always interested in connecting and opening the possibilities for students. And even if a PI doesn't respond right away, just insist, because sometimes we are too busy and we put things in the back burner. I try to highlight or flag my emails to later reply, but sometimes I forget. But just insist. It's not because we don't care. Sometimes we are too busy, but just keep trying.
And I'll say this, as BIO5, it's one of our missions. It's ingrained in what we are supposed to do, is be a conduit to that kind of connection for our community. So everything Dr. Stock said is absolutely true, and I was astounded when I came to the university 9 years ago about how accepting these very busy, important, successful women are, and yet they do. They reply to emails, they want to inspire the next generation. But also, if you don't hear back from somebody right away, again, don't take it personally, keep trying, but come to us, come to our staff, go on our website, look up my email, look up any of our staff, and reach out, and we will connect you with somebody that you might have an interest in meeting, or find somebody, even if they're not readily available to us, that you might have a good connection with. So use us as a resource. That's one reason we're here tonight, is to let you all know that we can be used as a resource for that.
I'd just like to add something. So
we forgot to give you your last statement.
No, that's okay. People can ask me anything they want later. I'm very open to talking about anything and obstacles and things like that. But Dr. Stock's point and your point, Lisa, is outstanding. I just want to say a couple of things. One is that I am getting feedback. The people that have been successful in coming to work for me are the people that were persistent and emailed me many times, because it took a long time for me to get back to them. I have to, and it's not because I didn't want to. So we always assume, oh, well, they didn't respond, maybe I'm bothering them. So, I just want to reiterate for the third time, because it's so important. The other thing is, I want to share a piece of advice that I was given by my ex-husband, who's in the business field, because in business, he was always trying to get attention from people that are very busy, scientists actually. And he said, you don't ask them for their time, you don't ask them to give you something, you ask them for advice, because they love giving advice. So that's the way you title your email, and I do that all the time. And then finally, I forgot what I was going to say, but I am old, so there's a reason.
We can come back to you as well. Anybody else? Questions?
Hello. I don't know if any other women have this issue, but ever since I was young, I've always found myself apologizing for everything that I do. And now that I'm an undergraduate in a research lab, even for little things that I do wrong, I find myself apologizing. When is the right way to apologize, and when should you not apologize,
But I would say you apologize when you did something wrong, asking, and you are really conscious about that. Sometimes we do things wrong and we don't apologize, and that's bad. But I noticed that, and I think actually, I hate to generalize it to a women thing, but I find it more common in women. In fact, I had an issue with a student for a very serious situation in interactions with someone else, and she kept apologizing for explaining her uncomfortable situation. And I said, you have nothing to apologize. I'm here to understand what you want to say, and that's the whole thing, or if and if you do something and your advisor tells you, this is the way you need to do it, or you did it wrong, don't apologize, but explain, I did this because this is how I thought, and I'll try not to do it. But sometimes it's like the word or the phrase that happens for filling a hole, like when you say I know or don't do it, because only if you did something wrong. What do you have to apologize if you are just wanting to have knowledge or find an answer? There's nothing wrong there. So just be conscious about that, and bite your tongue when you are going to say I'm sorry,
I found that sometimes I will find myself apologizing for reacting to situations, like having emotions. So that's another thing. Don't apologize for having emotions either. And I think as women, that's something that, we're supposed to be more stoic. We're not supposed to cry. We're not supposed to be upset. No, we can do all that. So don't apologize for those things either.
Hi, my name is Jill. I'm an undergrad here at the University of Arizona, and I started working in research in November, and I love it. But I've been faced with this crisis that every single day I come to the university, I discover all of these things that I just know nothing about. And it's like the more I come here, the more I realize I don't know. And it's a little intimidating and overwhelming, but exciting too. And my question would be, when you have a big question or problem that you want to solve, how do you decide which thread to follow first?
So I understand that I started in my lab over the summer, and a big part of it is coding and programming, and I've actually zero experience with that when I started, and so there was a steep learning curve and a lot of questions. As for where to find the answers, I think, I mean, I don't know exactly what kind of questions you're looking for, but in labs, I always go to the grad students first, and I think it's really hard to kind of get used to not knowing, because I think a lot of people, you want to seem like you know what you're doing. You want to prove that you deserve to be here, and so for some reason you're like, oh, I should already know all of this, that's nothing. And so I think just asking, start with people who you think might know, and if they don't know, they will go to their person who they think might know, and then that'll just keep going, and then that's life. And so I think that's where I'd start, at least. I don't.
Just to follow on that, I think what Dr. Barton said was really true to me, is just faking it till you making it. And just I continue to be confused about things or feel like I don't know enough, but it's because I really love exploring and trying new things. I've navigated so many different disciplines because that's where I find the exciting science. And so sometimes I get back to doing the thing that I learned how to do before, and I'm like, oh, this feels comfortable. This is crazy. I know so much about this topic, instead of being always in this territory of, new worlds and new science and new methods. So I think a lot of us in research still feel that way, and maybe at some point you harness it and you sort of find the fun in it. And I think that's in my classes, I try to discuss that too, that the things I find most interesting in the class are the parts that we don't know enough about. It's not necessarily the textbook, straightforward answers we have. It's where we lack understanding, where the measurements, where we need new measurements. That's the part that's really fun. So I guess maybe just embracing it a little bit, and then navigating your path with what inspires you along the way. Something will. So.
What advice would you guys give to a high school student or an undergraduate student who's interested in STEM but might be struggling in their science and math classes, and they start wondering if STEM is really for them?
So when I was younger, everybody said, oh, engineers love math. You have to love math to be an engineer. That's a bunch of bahooey. You don't have to. You can hate math. I actually really don't like math at all. And I was never a great student when I was younger, and it's okay. I do find that you have to do well enough to pass. You have to do well enough to get good enough grades to get into college. And, for instance, here at the University of Arizona, engineering has a slightly higher GPA requirement, but it's still not that high. You have to do well enough, and then don't let that bother you. Find the things about it that you're passionate about and focus on those. I also find that there is almost zero correlation between the people who are really successful in the lab and do really great creative work and their GPA. So that shows that, obviously they have to do well enough, but if you're at the University of Arizona, you're well enough. So don't worry about it. Get through it. If you are interested in an area in STEM, keep pursuing it, and don't get so hung up on how well you're doing in the classes.
Thank you. I also want to say, get help. It's okay to get help. So I'll give as an example. I was really burned out actually from high school. And my freshman year of college, I started, and I thought, maybe I want to go to med school. And I found, you know what, I don't want to be in basic chemistry right now with all these other cutthroat med students. So I dropped it. And then I took a year off, and then I came back, and this is a long story, and I apologize for the length. But when I came back, I started chemistry now, delayed again because I didn't realize I wanted to do the MD thing the first year I got back. So as a junior, And I was taking chemistry and physics at the same time and calculus. And I bombed my first chemistry class. I mean, really, my first exam, really badly. And I freaked out because I was pretty good at chemistry in high school. So I went to the tutor at the library. And I found this was a really cool phenomenon. When you went to the tutor and did your homework with the tutor, you actually could understand everything. And then the next test, I did really well. It's okay to get help, okay? So it doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means you're smart to get it.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm an undergraduate, and I am going to start applying to PhD programs hopefully this upcoming year. I am currently involved in research, and I absolutely love it, and that's the main reason I want to go and get a PhD is to continue exploring those questions and staying curious and doing all of that. Something that I've been kind of concerned about, though, is afterwards. Will I actually be able to keep staying in basic research and doing bench work, because I actually enjoy the repetitiveness of it and just being able to sit there and be like, I'm going to do this procedure, I want it to work, and I'm going to get data and be able to solve a problem. So I guess my question is, for those of you who have now established professor and director careers, have you guys been able to stay involved with that basic research if you do enjoy it?
I'll start briefly, and then just run a research campaign where you don't have enough help, and so you're in there doing all the plumbing yourself.
Oh, well, you know what? As you move up in the ladder, you will do less and less hands-on research. So for the records, which is kind of, every time I had the chance to go to the lab and do something, I feel like that day was wonderful for me. But yeah, you can do anything, that you want, and you need to ask yourself. So being in academia is actually a challenge when we have students, and as a mentor, to provide advice in careers that are not related to academia. And that is an issue that the universities are more and more becoming aware, and we want to tackle what is called multiple career pathways, because you not necessarily need to be a clone of whoever we are here in the audience, right? You can be all of us, you can be one of us, a combination, you can be something totally different. You might find out as you move in your career that you had your PhD, you got your research, but you want to go to industry, or you want to focus only on teaching science, not doing research. You could be an advisor for, environmental policy or any other policy that will require scientific knowledge. So it's probably too early, but it's okay if you change, it's okay if not, but just be aware of the different possibilities, and that there are many choices that you can take and do that. But hands-on will come away and away as you move up in the ladder in your career.
So I had a similar feeling when I started. The first year that I started my own research lab, I was completely devastated that I was not working in the lab, because I was getting everything set up and writing the first big grant to kind of solidify the lab and everything. But I got to a point, and I can't say that I have fully went back to the lab, but I've always kind of like held on to something that I do for the lab. And so that I continue being in there. So what you can do is, so you're going to go into graduate school, so you're going to get a few years of bench work. You probably go to a postdoc, you're still going to have some years of bench work. You might learn a lot of things throughout that process, or try different things, especially during the postdoctoral stage, where sometimes your professor, your PI will let you kind of do things for the lab, and you're going to get a taste of all these other things that you can do that are not necessarily pipetting on the bench. Might change your mind. But, let's say you get all the way to the stage where you're a PI and you have your own lab. If you make it a priority to be in the lab and do some of the work, you can. You just need to budget the time and do it. There's faculty in the program that still do surgeries for their animals. On Thursday, I was, shaving mice and doing ultrasound. And, sometimes people kind of like go like this when I walk into the lab because they're afraid that I'm going to destroy everything because I haven't been there for a while. But I go there and I do a lot of microscope work, and something breaks in the lab, and fortunately I usually am the one who fixes it. And so I still have that connection with the lab, not as big as I wish, but it's something that I put into my agenda, and I really want to be there, and I don't want to lose that, even if it's a couple of hours a week where I go and wreak havoc in the lab. So.
Hi there, my name is Rita, and I'm a school counselor, so I'm pretty passionate about empowering students to become whatever they want, especially if they're the first to graduate within their family. But I'm here for my daughter who just got accepted into the KEYS program. Yeah. So you can imagine, I'm always sharing these opportunities with kids because a lot of them don't know, not until they're out of high school. I wish I would have gotten into this. But I'm so proud of her, and I had never heard about the KEYS program. What an awesome opportunity. What advice or recommendations do you have for my daughter and any student who's in KEYS so that they take full advantage of it and they have the best experience? What tips do you have or recommendations?
So first of all,
she's not assigned yet. So.
Congratulations again. That's fantastic. So you have 7 weeks here at the University of Arizona that you get to learn all about things that are going on. You're going to have a week, you're going to get trained up, you're going to learn all kinds of techniques, everything from pipetting and genomic analysis, and then you're going to go into a laboratory for 6 weeks and you're going to learn a lot about what happens in that laboratory. But, while you're here, branch out, talk to your other 49 colleagues and find out what labs they're in, find out what they're doing, take a visit around if you can. This is something we encourage students at all levels to do. The doors are open for you. You're a student, you are welcome everywhere. So take advantage of that and find out what's happening. You may or may not end up loving what it is that you do for that 6 weeks, but the idea is that it gives you a taste. But hopefully, while you're here, you'll find out about other things. And you'll have speakers come through as part of the program that will help you do that. But networking with those people, networking with your fellow KEYS interns, good luck. It's fantastic. I am so jealous. I want to go back and do that too. I want to be. Can I be a KEYS intern?
No, we need you to have a KEYS intern.
I get to mentor them. That's even better.
I'm pretty jealous because I'm an alumni here, and had I known, what I know now, I probably would have picked something like this. But I still love what I do. Thank you.
I noticed that both of you mentioned it's either too late for me or I'm already kind of done this. There are actually programs. I don't know if U of A has any of those grants, but there are actually programs. Actually, any R01, you can actually put in a supplement to have a STEM teacher come to your lab and do research. So you could be doing what the KEYS students are doing, or any of our young people here going to school. So don't think it's too late. Just keep an eye peeled for those opportunities.
As soon as the mic turns on, I'm also going to jump in. I was a KEYS alum in 2017, so I've gone through the program. And one of the things that Dr. Marty says, Dr. Lindsay, Dr. Marty? Dr. Lindsay, sorry. I always confuse her two names. That Dr. Lindsay says, first off, is this is going to be the hardest thing that you are going to do until medical school. And she's right. So to go through and prepare yourself, just know it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be something that you may necessarily grasp right away, but you will grasp it. Something that Brooke likes to go through and say is only 2 people have ever left the program. That's it. And we've had, I think at this point, well over 300 students go through and get through the program. So it is going to be difficult, but it is going to be fundamental as well. It has shaped who I am currently. It's the reason that I'm in molecular and cellular biology. It's the reason I was in a lab and then said, I don't like doing protein work, so I'm going to get out of lab, and it's the reason I'm here. So it provides so many opportunities to go through and see where you can be, and provides a little step up for jumping off from then on. So be prepared, accept that it's going to be rough, and science is 90%. Yes. So at the end, they give a presentation with the research poster behind them and everything. And When I was an intern, I really liked that aspect. I think research presentation day was my favorite day because I got to sit there and talk to people of all different scientific backgrounds and say, I am still young. I still don't know anything, basically, but I do know this. And I can go through and tell you about it too, so that way you can also know this. And it's really interesting to go through and talk to like your grandma who comes up and is like, so what do these colorful blocks mean? And then have your PI come up and go, so how did pKa actually go through and affect the G alpha, beta, gamma subunits? And how did that go through and affect them? And you're like, oh boy, I now have to get real technical. So just seeing that depth of all of the different presentations that you'll give and the people that you'll give them to is really cool about the presentation day. I'll stop hijacking the stage now.
I'm going to say something real quick too, just for keys. We've had students come through keys in our lab, and just for doing research in general. Don't be scared to ask questions to the PI or to the grad students or even the undergrads that are in the labs, because we're all there because we actually really like it, and you're not bothering us, and chances are you're going to learn something that you wouldn't necessarily learn from the graduate student or undergrad that you are working with. I know that a lot of the undergrads come to me and ask me questions, and we go off to whiteboards and just start drawing and go off on tangents. So just don't be afraid to ask questions. Yeah.
So I just want to back up from that for 1 second. For those that don't know, since we went on a keys like celebration right there, because we love keys. For those that don't know what the keys program is, and for the high school students or parents or teachers or counselors in the room, it's a high school internship program for students across the state of Arizona. As Dr. Barton said, we get students that come here for 7 weeks in the summer. They commit their summers to doing a hands-on intensive research internship, and they get assigned to a lab, a PI, a principal investigator in an area of interest to them, and they get to work, they get to train for a week on basic techniques, and then they get to be in the labs for 6 weeks doing hands-on work, contributing to an actual research project that lab is working on at that time. And at the end of that, they get to present a poster at a community event where we have about 400, 500 people come. And we've had almost 500 people, and we're going into our 12th year. So we're really proud of that program. If you have interest, again, go to our website, go to the Keys website, keys.arizona.edu, or the BIO5 website will take you there also, or contact any of us. It's an incredible program. It's highly competitive, but we don't just take the top students. We look at people that come from all over the state. We want people to have opportunities that wouldn't necessarily have them in their own schools, to learn and to be exposed to this type of situation where they get these connections, they get this type of mentorship, and as Jordan said, it just provides such a springboard into a STEM and academic setting, and into an undergraduate experience that you might not have otherwise. So if anybody has questions after on that, please ask any of us.
Okay, so, I have had experience with assertive women in leadership roles being labeled as aggressive. So my question, I guess, is kind of, do any of you have experience with that? And do you have any advice on kind of how to mitigate that image? Kind of move away from it.
Do I have that kind of aura of aggressiveness? Yeah, that's challenging. I think for women there's always the stereotype, that if you are quiet and smiley, you are soft and people can run you over. But if you speak up for yourself, you are aggressive. And I'm not going to say, but there's other bad words that people label us. Bossy, yes. And but I don't know. There are all kinds of personalities. I think I have dealt with women that are aggressive and men that are aggressive too, and that's their personalities. If it's aggressive in the constructive way, sometimes you really have to do it to push it forward. When I came to this university, I had no support. No one knew. I came from a postdoc at the University of California, Davis, and then my education from Argentina. So I had to have an aggressive behavior in the positive way. And I always kind of like to picture this. I felt like I was in the jungle with a machete trying to make my path, because here I am. I'm someone that has knowledge and had at that time potential and a lot to offer, but no one knew me. No one had rolled a red carpet for me to go through that path because I came from a renowned lab, or my PI was a laureate scientist. So I had to adopt an aggressive attitude to push myself, to recognize myself. And I had to do that even more because I'm a woman, I'm a Latino. I had all these other tags around me that, people could misinterpret who I was and who I am. And so now and then I have to develop that attitude to say, people, here I am, I'm a woman, I'm not a softie. Because I'm smile, it doesn't mean that I'm stupid or I don't know what I want. It's just, this is my personality, I'm friendly. And sometimes you have to stand for yourself. So being aggressive in that way, I think, it has a positive thing, and it's kind of like a tool that we need to develop as women to stand where we are. Now, if it's aggressive in the negative factor of trying to bully people or just thinking that you are on top of everyone, that is something negative, and I consider those not aggressive people, but toxic people. And I put them aside. If I have to deal with them, I deal with them, but I don't let them impregnate my soul and my behavior. So that's all I can say about being aggressive.
So I think I benefited from going to, I'm a West Coaster, but I went to grad school in Boston in a very direct environment, and I sort of learned to become more direct, and I think many of us probably are fundamentally, but then we have these layers of culturing, that sort of make us feel bad about that. And so I think what I've learned in my 3 years on this job is that, if anything, most of my female colleagues will appreciate that I'm being direct and will actually want advice to be more direct. They want to ask for more. They don't like being in situations where they feel like they're being taken advantage of. And so I think there are ways to accomplish being not aggressive, but direct and standing up for yourself that people respect more than not respecting. And honestly, if they have a problem with it, I just don't think we have the time or space or, mental energy to really worry about those people all the time. And so I think that women, we could honestly use to be more direct. I have male colleagues who also don't advocate for themselves as much as they should. So I think we all it's okay. And I think embracing it is okay. And it goes back to my first point that that's one part of becoming a leader that can be very uncomfortable, because you are getting feedback and you are sensing that culturally it's a little bit different to be like that. But I've had people in my own group just tell me, we think it's great, we think you should own it. And so I think it's different if you're trying to cut people down or if you're trying to be aggressive to be more like a man to be successful. And I work with women because women are good. They do awesome work, and I think that we can be direct and not be aggressive or toxic, as you say. So I think it's just about embracing that a little bit more.
Yeah, I can just also add that, it's being direct, it's being honest, it's being forthright, it's being persistent, and also niceness is underrated. Be nice, be polite, always. I think that's, I do not always follow my own advice, but I try very hard to remember, what my mother told me about being polite and being nice. And those two things can go along, actually they can go along very well together. You just have to remember that you are direct, you are insistent, you are persistent, and you are good. You bring something to the table at the same time. And the people who matter will quickly learn to appreciate that. And the people who don't matter, then we don't have to worry about.
How are we doing on time, Amy? 10 minutes? Okay, we're good.
So something I think I personally struggle with and a lot of women in STEM struggle with is imposter syndrome and feeling that like you don't really deserve where you are and that you've just kind of gotten there. And I find myself, I'm still in high school, I find myself looking around at my peers being like, oh wow, everybody is so much smarter than me and I'm just here playing the fool and I don't really belong here. And so for those of you who are later on in your career path and even undergraduate and graduate studies, how have you dealt with that? Do you still struggle with it? And do you have advice on kind of tamping down those personal issues?
Dr. Craig, you mentioned you had talked about this, right? I'll put you on the spot.
That right there was the first example of it. Like, I was asked to give an opinion, and I felt like I don't know how to say this. I think I boiled it down to something simple. It is imposter syndrome is, believe it or not, is something healthy in a way if you keep it under control, and it's called self-doubt. Until recently, right? Self-doubt is what keeps you kind of like in check. Like you say, maybe I can't do this. But you have to kind of take an active role in taking that self-doubt, that energy that generates in your body, that emotion, and turn it into like an effort to do something better. Because whenever you're feeling that way, it's because you're unhappy with your performance with something, right? You're saying, oh man, I'm not doing, these people got, they wrote 3 more grants this year. Why I'm not writing? Maybe I'm not cut out for this job. So that's the self-doubt. But you have to use that energy to say, well, maybe I need to kind of really get up and maybe then do 1 more grant instead, Use that to power your performance, not to kind of like paralyze you. You can't let it paralyze you. Try to use that. But it is very real. It happens all the time. It happens to me all the time. It's something that you will face every day. And that's, you just have to kind of find a way to turn it into positive energy to kind of push you forward and get, your goals accomplished.
I think it's also, okay. So, I mean, my first years of grad school, absolutely. I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Everyone out here is so smart. But it's also, we are all just really different people. So you have to remember that. You can't just constantly compare yourself to the person that's next to you, because I have a totally different background than my peers that I was comparing myself to. And so that's not really fair. It's not fair to yourself, because maybe they're better at one specific class than you are, but maybe you can run a lot faster than they can. So, I mean, there's a lot to us, and I don't think we can just stereotype ourselves of saying, like, oh, I'm not as good at them, or just, you got to be nicer to yourself. And there's more to life than just, being the best at one part of school.
So it's so funny that you were mentioning that about feeling like, oh, well, I don't really want to talk about this because I feel like, well, I'm not an expert. I don't know that much about imposter syndrome, but I am a psychiatrist. And what I'm hearing actually is, oh my goodness, this is the perfect opportunity to employ some techniques that we have in cognitive behavior therapy. And if you're not familiar with that, just Google it. And you can pull up a lot of these tools. And there's a process that we do and you can learn how to do it yourself. I actually got really interested in psychiatry because of this particular type of therapy that teaches people that participate in it the tools to learn how to then take on the problem themselves and become independent. So you do something called cognitive reframing. How do I take this as, well, I'm not good enough? Okay, all right, let's take that at face value. You're not good enough. I want you to take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and I want you to put on one side, what's the evidence for this? And on the other side, what's the evidence against this? Well, then you have to fill it out. And what you find is, what's the evidence for this fact that I'm not good enough? Maybe actually it's really hard to find evidence. What's on the other side? Well, what's the evidence that I am good enough? Well, actually, my grades are really good. And actually, my teachers tell me that I'm good at this. And actually, I have friends that say that I'm really good at this. And once you look at that piece of paper and you see the number of things in the column that says you are, and the number in the column that says you're not, then you can't deny anymore. And so try to use these tools.
Hi, I'm Kirtana. I'm a PhD student here at the U of A. And so Brittany's also from my lab, or from the same lab. And so we just have, I think, not a very supportive PI. So just to give you an example, so this was right after my first mock PhD comprehensive exam. So I'd taken a mock exam with a bunch of senior grad students to prepare for the actual exam. Did not go so well. And so I was really upset. He came in and asked how it went, and I told him that it was not great, and I kind of just burst into tears at that point. And the first thing he says to me is, "You're reacting to criticism like a 12-year-old." Not the most constructive or helpful thing to hear at that point. So I think all the grad students in our lab feel similarly too. We're just really wondering, how do you deal with, so I'm really having trouble maintaining confidence or motivation to continue doing what I'm doing. And I think Brittany is kind of on the same page. So we're just wondering how to deal with a situation like that.
I'm gonna grab the mic. We stole the panel mic. Anybody want to?
Well, I can start, but I certainly don't have a comprehensive answer, because that's a really hard situation to be in, and I'm sorry about that. I found in my experience, my graduate advisor was not mean or to me in that way, but he didn't offer relevant expertise, or he didn't have all the expertise I was looking for, and also he got the job in a time that was very different. Like, I didn't feel like he necessarily had the advice that would help me, and so I did find a lot of different mentors and just reached out for other subject experts and other people that I felt like could speak to me in other ways. So if there's not a way to directly change the situation, or maybe that's not the step you want to do right now, I would just say it's always healthy to have more people in your life, PIs, postdocs, graduate students, people that can give you different types of advice and help support you in different ways. So that's, I guess, my first piece. Yeah, but sorry to hear about that.
And I don't want to dig into the details, because I don't want to have your PI be disclosed by information, but be aware that there's the Office of Institutional Equity, that if you feel like you're not being treated right, you can anonymously or identifiably find some kind of support and an investigation for that. It's very unfortunate, and you are not the first, neither the last, perhaps, in situations like this. I also had a PI that was very much hands-off, but as I said, in my presentation, I always took the no's and the negativism to be something positive, and a force to drive me to do the things that I wanted to do. You can always change labs, and that's not bad, because sometimes you go to a lab because maybe you are following the research, the prestige of the lab, but that's not the way you are going to be successful. You can come from an anonymous lab and still be successful and build a wonderful career. There might be other people that perhaps personality-wise, they match with your personality and can be a good advisor. So it's better if you decide that this is not a good match, to speak up to your committee, or outside the committee if it becomes too personal, to express those needs and find other resources. It's important that you do it now before it's too late. So be aware of that.
We've got about one, two, oh. You're good. You take your time.
Okay. So I'm a high school junior right now, and I have no idea what